as much as we're talking about, bringing it up to the larger Muslim community, we also need an element of self-education, because what happens is the othering that happens of Islamic scholarship and Islamic know-how and who is more Muslim, it happens even within our own masjids and masjids that are run by Black Muslims. And what happens is somehow, just because someone is from an Arab background, somehow they have a priority of knowing the religion more, or being more pious, or becoming the imam, or becoming the Quran teacher, while you could have a Black sister who's equally qualified, but just because of where she's from, or whatever it might be, not get that opportunity. So it's like some of the work that Sheikh Abdul Hakim Cook has been doing is that whole education of, after Makkah, right? It was Abyssinia. It was East Africa that Islam was formed. Like, forget everything else. Like, so there was Mecca before even Medina, right? So like that whole inherentness of Black and Muslim being together. And even when Medina, when the Muslims came back, there was the Ansar and the Muhajirin, and then the Abyssinians who came back with the first Muhajirin. That was the Muslim society, right? So I like this, I only learned this about this maybe of the past maybe 6-7 years, right? So this is again not being taught anywhere. So that whole self-education is very, very vital as we continue having these conversations.
Even in Mecca, it started from there, where the people around. I mean, the Sahabas, a lot of them were Black, and when we look at that in the relationship and the involvement, and we're like, man, we've been there from the beginning. And this is important because a lot of Black people don't know that. It's not just Bilal, and this is all you hear. And this is very important to actually get this sort of ownership.
Black people we're always talking about, you can't have a conversation with a bunch of Black people without maybe within 2 minutes racism sort of coming up, or some kind of trauma associated with race coming up. Because I think, racism is such a traumatic experience for us. Like many of us can always remember the first time, we had some kind of encounter or were disparaged because of the fact that, we have a bit more melanin and we look a little bit different. We can remember when we were called the N-word. We can remember being second-guessed. We can remember not being selected for a certain opportunity because of our skin color. All of these things. So it becomes a traumatic experience that we then internalize, and then it becomes something that we live with throughout our lives. But ultimately, I think it's from an Islamic context, it's even more traumatic because of what we know about the religion. Because at the core of the religion is, this is what attracts people like Malcolm X to the religion, is the total destruction of the concept of racism. The idea of superiority on the basis of skin color, ethnicity is something that is rooted first and foremost in the very narrative of a shaitan in the Quran. Someone who takes pride in his ethnic origin, someone who takes pride in having been created differently by Allah. And when Allah questions why he hasn't obeyed his order, he references the way in which he was made. So we think about the Prophet, peace be upon him, his last sermon, and his reference to his community, telling 100,000 Sahaba that if an Abyssinian slave with hair like raisin, or reminding them that a black has no superiority over a white and a white has no superiority over black. It's at the root and at the core of this religion to overcome, to face squarely the issue of racial and ethnic pride and prejudice. So I think that's why many of us we can't even understand or fathom how our Muslim brothers and sisters don't seem to make this connection between their Islamic identity and how they're treating and looking at Black people.
To add to that as well, at the very end of that sermon, the the last line, like there's no black is better than a white, no white is better than a black, except by piety and good character.
Yeah.
So there is a hierarchy.
Yeah.
Like it's cutting down the racial hierarchy and introducing one that is supposed to encourage us to strive towards the betterment of our character and something that is pleasing to Allah. And I think in the practice of racism as it exists in various communities, what is so disheartening is that you lose that last part.
Yeah.
You uphold the hierarchy that we are supposed to be breaking down, and you break down the one that we are supposed to be emulating.
The Prophet, peace be upon him, mentions in the sermon that, you know, he says to his companions that they should take this message to those who were not here. And he says that may those who were not here understand or hear this better than those who were here. And, you know, many scholars have said that, you know, this is not just for their time, but this is for our time as well. So in some ways, Black people discussing racism and trauma is a continuation of that sermon. Us making our brothers and sisters from other backgrounds aware of the effects of racism on us is a continuation and a practice of what the Prophet, peace be upon him, has asked us to do. So I think I take your point that, you know, sometimes, you know, there's always this tension and this desire to, you know, remove ourselves from having expectations from the broader community and sort of secluding ourselves out and doing our own thing, which is something that in many ways might be needed in certain circumstances as part of the healing process, as part of the ability to speak towards our own issues and challenges. But at the same time, I don't think we can ever forget that we also have a responsibility to communicate the message, at least part of the Islamic message, as a reminder to our Muslim brothers and sisters, and hopefully even to the broader non-Muslim community. I mean, I come from a non-Muslim background, and, you know, as a convert, you know, I didn't have anybody come to me and explain to me Islam's position or how relevant how relevant the issue of anti-racism or how Islam takes a very strident line towards anti-blackness or anti-racism or racism rather. If someone had taught me that or sort of exposed me to that, that might have left an impression upon me when I was much younger. And it's not until many of us are older that we come across, you know, figures like Malcolm X, who are people who are continuing the struggle against racism. And then we identify his religion and his relationship to his religion and his actions, and then we draw a connection to that, and we say we want to be like that. You know, and how many brothers and sisters came to Islam because of Malcolm X embodying that message.